In 2025, America is quietly entering one of the most dangerous breakdowns in its modern history. Over 42 million Americans, that's 12% of the nation, are about to lose their food assistance as SNAP benefits freeze during the government shutdown. The impact? Grocery sales could collapse by $8.3 billion a month, costing small stores their lifeline, while the U.S. economy has already lost $18 billion in productivity. Air traffic controllers are unpaid, TSA agents are forced to work illegally without checks, and markets are trembling. This isn't politics anymore. It's a slow, systemic collapse of the world's largest economy. Across America, the invisible thread holding millions of households together is about to snap. SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, feeds 42 million Americans, roughly 1 out of every 8 citizens. But with the shutdown dragging on, that thread is unraveling fast. By November, $8.3 billion in monthly food aid will evaporate overnight, cutting off families who depend on it for their next meal. This isn't a glitch or a delay. It's a full-scale collapse of a system that's quietly kept millions alive for decades. The USDA claims it can't legally use its contingency funds, arguing they're reserved for natural disasters. Yet, hunger is already a disaster in progress. The agency's refusal has ignited fury among governors, as some states scramble to find temporary funding, while others admit they simply can't. 12 states have announced partial payments, 9 will issue none at all, and the rest are silent. The divide is widening. For many families, the next grocery trip might be their last for a while. To grasp the scale, consider this. SNAP recipients spend an average of $265 a month on groceries. Multiply that by 42 million people, and you see a monthly shortfall of over $11 billion in consumer spending vanishing from local economies. That's not just food disappearing, it's jobs, sales tax, and business survival. In states like Mississippi and Louisiana, where over 20% of residents rely on SNAP, store owners are watching shelves sit untouched. The ripple effect is brutal. A grocery chain in Missouri says 65% of its sales come from customers using SNAP. In parts of California's Bay Area, it's closer to 90%. Without these funds, thousands of small grocers won't last 60 days. Perishables are rotting in coolers, workers are being sent home early, and truck deliveries are shrinking by half. This isn't just poverty, it's paralysis. America's most essential safety net has become a casualty of political warfare. And when $100 billion in annual aid suddenly stops flowing, it exposes a horrifying truth. The richest nation on Earth has built its food system on borrowed time and borrowed money. The shutdown's next victims aren't Wall Street traders or politicians. They're the corner grocery stores that feed America's neighborhoods. When $8.3 billion in monthly SNAP spending disappears, the blow lands directly on the nation's smallest retailers, already surviving on margins thinner than 2%. They don't have cash cushions or corporate safety nets. One bad quarter can erase a decade of work. In towns like Springfield, Missouri, or rural Alabama, entire communities revolve around a single grocery. These stores keep local truckers employed, stock milk from nearby farms, and collect state tax revenue that funds schools. Now, sales are collapsing by 40 to 70% as SNAP transactions vanish. Shelves stay full, but registers fall silent. Perishables spoil within days. Refrigeration bills remain the same, and staff hours are being cut hour by hour. Each empty cart represents money that once cycled through the town's veins, money that no longer exists. The chain reaction is brutal. When grocers reduce orders, suppliers downshift. Distribution warehouses lay off drivers, packaging companies close lines, and local farmers dump unsold produce. Diesel demand falls, transport firms lose contracts, and small-town economies contract from the inside out. The effect multiplies. For every $1 billion removed from SNAP circulation, economists estimate nearly 13,000 jobs evaporate across logistics, retail, and food production. Multiply that by 8, and you're looking at a silent elimination of more than 100,000 jobs in just a few months. Unlike past recessions, this collapse doesn't start with credit defaults or Wall Street bubbles. It begins with hunger. The average grocery store depends on steady volume. When families stop buying milk and bread, nothing else can offset the gap. The domino doesn't stop at checkout counters. It reaches the landlords collecting rent, the cities collecting sales tax, and the banks holding inventory loans. The SNAP freeze isn't just starving households, it's starving the entire retail ecosystem. And as each small store flickers out, the map of food access in America begins to darken, one county at a time. What begins with local grocers soon reaches the biggest names in American retail. Corporations that once seemed untouchable are now calculating billion-dollar losses as the SNAP halt rips through their ledgers. Walmart, which captures roughly 26% of all SNAP grocery spending, faces potential revenue losses exceeding $2 billion per month. That's not from luxury goods. It's from basic survival items: milk, rice, bread, diapers. When that flow stops, even a company with 4,600 stores feels the tremor. But the crisis doesn't stop at Walmart's doors. Dollar General, Kroger, and Target collectively depend on SNAP households for more than 20% of their grocery volume. In rural America, Dollar General operates as the only accessible food source for millions, and these communities are precisely where SNAP concentration is highest. If government benefits freeze through the winter, analysts warn of mass store closures in areas where alternatives simply don't exist. The result: entire food deserts expanding across hundreds of counties. Corporate executives now face a paradox: lower prices to survive or maintain profits, and risk collapse. During the last quarter, Walmart rolled back prices on 7,400 items, double the previous year, sacrificing margins to retain foot traffic. Yet, there's a limit to how long they can absorb inflation and lost subsidy spending. Retailers already confront surging costs: transportation up 15%, inventory financing up 40%, and a labor market tightening under rising wages. This shockwave also reverberates through the financial system. Every major grocer carries enormous short-term debt to maintain stock. As sales volumes plunge, those loans become toxic. Credit analysts are quietly warning of a retail liquidity crisis, a cascading effect where chains struggle to refinance at higher interest rates. This isn't speculation, it's arithmetic. A 1% decline in national grocery spending equals nearly $9 billion in lost GDP. The SNAP collapse has mutated from a welfare issue into a corporate survival test. The same giants that once symbolized abundance are now trimming staff, freezing expansion, and bracing for balance sheets soaked in red ink. America's consumer engine, the system built to never stop spending, is beginning to seize. As grocery shelves empty and corporations bleed, another crisis unfolds in silence: a total blackout of federal economic data. The shutdown hasn't just halted food assistance, it's severed the lifeline of information that drives financial stability. With government agencies frozen, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Census Bureau, and Commerce Department have stopped releasing critical reports. No jobs data, no inflation index, no retail sales updates. The U.S. economy, worth $28 trillion, is now operating without instruments, flying blind into a storm. The Federal Reserve depends entirely on this data to guide interest rate decisions. But in this blackout, their data-dependent strategy collapses. The October jobs report never came. The November CPI report is canceled, and now policymakers are making trillion-dollar decisions on guesswork. Before the shutdown, markets priced in a 93% chance of a December rate cut. Within days, that confidence fell to 70%, wiping out $1.2 trillion in market capitalization as investors fled uncertainty. It's not volatility, it's paralysis. Wall Street analysts are now forced to rely on private estimates that vary wildly, some showing inflation cooling, others warning of a hidden surge. Without federal releases, trust collapses. Traders call it economic darkness. The Dow slips, Treasury yields spike, and confidence in U.S. credibility, the backbone of global finance, starts to fracture. Foreign investors holding $7.6 trillion in U.S. debt are quietly reducing exposure. Even a 1% shift in foreign bond holdings could send borrowing costs soaring for every American. This isn't just a data delay, it's the erosion of transparency. Without accurate statistics, the Fed can't predict inflation, corporations can't forecast earnings, and consumers can't interpret the direction of the economy. It's an invisible collapse, not televised, not debated, but unfolding in real time. While politicians fight on camera, economists describe the situation as the most dangerous blind spot in decades. Because when a superpower can't see its own pulse, it doesn't just lose control, it loses credibility. The shutdown has transformed from a political standoff into something far darker, an economy trying to navigate the future with its eyes closed. As America's economy loses sight, another critical system begins to choke: its transportation grid. The same government shutdown that froze SNAP payments and paralyzed economic data has now hit the nation's airports. 60,000 Transportation Security Administration (TSA) agents and 13,000 air traffic controllers are required by law to keep working. But none of them are being paid. Every day they show up, scanning passengers, directing planes, and protecting borders, while their paychecks remain frozen. It's not just demoralizing, it's destabilizing a network that moves 2.5 million travelers daily and underpins nearly $1.7 trillion in U.S. economic activity. Federal law prohibits these workers from striking, but legality doesn't feed families. Morale has collapsed, absenteeism is rising, and airports in major hubs like Atlanta, Miami, and Chicago are reporting 30 to 40% longer wait times. Each hour of delay costs airlines an estimated $74 million in operational losses. Multiply that by days, and you start to see how a political stalemate can bleed into economic disaster. Planes can't take off without controllers, and cargo can't move without clearance. When those systems falter, food, medicine, and essential goods stall in transit, tightening the same supply chain already crippled by grocery declines. Holiday travel season looms just weeks away. The aviation industry is warning of a systemic freeze if the shutdown extends through Thanksgiving. Airline stocks are sliding, insurance premiums for delays are surging, and every canceled flight compounds the broader slowdown. What began as unpaid labor is morphing into a national logistics crisis. Airports are not just terminals, they're arteries in America's economic body. They carry pharmaceuticals, fresh produce, and critical manufacturing parts across the country every hour. A single disruption ripples across industries within hours. Without intervention, experts estimate a $6 to $8 billion monthly impact if disruptions continue. From grocery aisles to airport runways, America's infrastructure is running on borrowed patience. The same government that funds food stamps and regulates markets now depends on unpaid workers to prevent chaos. The shutdown is no longer theoretical, it's physical, and every delayed flight, every unpaid shift, and every silent paycheck signals a country quietly grinding to a halt. The shutdown's economic shock has now reached American households. As aid vanishes, prices rise, and wages stagnate, millions are responding not with protest, but with withdrawal. The nation that once defined itself by consumption is learning to live with less. Average household grocery spending has already fallen from $1,700 to $1,250 per month, a 26% collapse in just one quarter, signaling the most aggressive consumer cutback since 2008. Families are stretching every dollar to its breaking point. Sales of premium brands are plunging, replaced by generic and store-brand alternatives. The volume of household goods sold by Procter & Gamble dropped 2.3% last quarter, a direct reflection of Americans using half the detergent, skipping softener, and recycling every towel. Food manufacturers report declining demand even as population grows, a historic contradiction that exposes the deep psychological shift underway. People are not waiting for prices to fall. They are adapting to permanent scarcity. This behavioral reversal is devastating for an economy built on consumption. 2/3 of U.S. GDP relies on spending, yet the average citizen now treats every purchase as a survival decision. Retail analysts report that nearly 70% of lower-income consumers are cutting entire product categories from their budgets. Restaurants are emptier, discretionary shopping districts quieter, and credit card spending volumes have declined for the first time in 11 years. The ripple extends far beyond the checkout lane. When consumers retreat, corporate inventory piles up. Logistics companies face surpluses. Advertising budgets shrink. The entire demand-driven machine seizes. Economists estimate that if consumer spending falls by another 3%, it could erase over $200 billion from national output, an economic contraction large enough to offset all job growth for the year. This is not a temporary reaction. It's a structural reset in how Americans perceive value, debt, and necessity. For decades, the country's prosperity was measured by how much people could buy. Now, survival is measured by how long they can make what they already have last. The spending engine that once powered the world has shifted into reverse, and it may never accelerate again. The consumer retreat is not born from fear alone. It's a reaction to an economy where prices never fall, only pause before rising again. What began as a temporary inflation spike has hardened into a structural feature of American life. Food-at-home inflation now stands at 2.7% year over year. But the real cost to households is far higher once utilities, rent, and transport are included. Even as the Federal Reserve cut interest rates by 25 basis points, the average grocery bill remains 34% higher than it was 5 years ago. Prices are no longer volatile, they're permanently elevated. Behind the illusion of cooling inflation lies a silent theft of purchasing power. The dollar Americans earned last year buys 6% less today, and the wages meant to offset that have stagnated. The median worker's real income has fallen by nearly $2,900 annually since 2020, effectively erasing any benefit from pay raises. Every monthly inflation report confirms the same truth. The recovery never came. It was replaced by normalization of crisis-level pricing. Grocery chains, once quick to pass supplier costs to consumers, are far slower to reverse them. When diesel prices rise, delivery costs surge immediately. When they fall, prices stay fixed. Analysts estimate that only 15% of supplier savings ever reach consumers, while 100% of increases are passed on. That imbalance has created a one-way economic staircase, upward. Inflation no longer feels like an event. It feels like gravity. This permanence is feeding despair. Surveys show 74% of Americans now believe prices will never return to pre-pandemic levels. The public no longer trusts the numbers coming from Washington. The official CPI says inflation is moderate, yet grocery aisles and rent payments tell a different story. Meanwhile, corporate profits remain near record highs, exposing the contradiction of an economy that punishes buyers but rewards the sellers. What makes this era different is its psychological cost. Inflation used to be cyclical, now it's cultural. It reshapes how people live, plan, and even think about the future. For a nation defined by optimism, this is the cruelest transformation of all. The acceptance that every tomorrow will cost more than today, and that relief is no longer part of the American vocabulary. While prices remain permanently high, another fault line is opening beneath the workforce. America's labor market, once the nation's strongest defense against economic shocks, is showing signs of collapse. In just 9 months, major employers have eliminated over 400,000 jobs, led by Amazon cutting 30,000, UPS slashing 48,000, and dozens of corporations freezing new hires entirely. For the first time in nearly a decade, the number of available jobs has fallen below the number of job seekers. There are now 0.98 openings for every unemployed worker, a ratio that signals the end of a stable employment era. This collapse isn't sudden, it's systemic. Businesses built on endless consumer demand are now shrinking under its absence. When grocery sales fall, when retail traffic thins, when transportation slows, jobs vanish in sequence. Warehouses that once ran non-stop now operate 3 days a week. Small manufacturers that supplied packaging to grocers are shutting lines. Logistics firms losing contracts have begun liquidating fleets. Each lost paycheck feeds another decline in spending, accelerating the loop. Economists call it a demand spiral, but for workers it's something simpler: erasure. Corporate executives call these cuts efficiency moves, but the data tells a harsher story. Job postings for full-time roles have dropped 22% year over year, while part-time and contract work are rising, the sign of a workforce being fragmented, not restructured. Average working hours have fallen to 34.2 per week, the lowest since 2010. Millions are technically employed, but earning too little to survive. The unemployment figures no longer reflect reality. Gig workers, temp contractors, and short-term employees float in statistical limbo, unseen in official counts. Meanwhile, debt delinquency rates are climbing, with credit card defaults rising 23% this year alone. It's the direct consequence of a labor system that no longer guarantees stability, even for those still holding jobs. The American job market is mutating into a survival contest. Income security, once the cornerstone of the middle class, is vanishing. When people can't rely on their next paycheck, the foundation of economic confidence disintegrates. The problem is no longer unemployment, it's underexistence. Millions working, yet unable to live. Every sector now mirrors the same sickness: dependence. From the unemployed worker to the corporate giant, from grocery aisles to Wall Street desks, America's economy survives on government flow rather than private strength. SNAP feeds families, subsidies prop up farms, bailouts rescue airlines, and rate cuts inflate the stock market. Each piece is tethered to federal money, and the moment it stops moving, the system trembles. The illusion of independence has collapsed. Even billion-dollar corporations rely on tax credits, stimulus leftovers, and artificially low interest rates to stay solvent. When $100 billion in monthly government support halts, it exposes the structural truth. This isn't a free market, it's a state-managed survival machine. The private economy no longer produces enough to sustain itself. It circulates borrowed capital, borrowed food, borrowed hope. Each dependency multiplies another. SNAP cuts trigger retail layoffs. Layoffs reduce tax revenues. Lower tax revenue worsens deficits. Deficits demand borrowing. That cycle, once academic theory, is now America's lived reality. The richest nation on earth functions like a household living paycheck to paycheck, except its paycheck is debt. The social contract that once bound workers, businesses, and government has dissolved into mutual blackmail. Citizens can't live without aid. Corporations can't profit without stimulus. Politicians can't govern without printing money. This is not sustainability, it's suspended animation. Every lifeline the government extends today becomes the noose of tomorrow. And yet, as the nation's economic fabric unravels, Washington remains locked in performance. Congress has voted on the same failed funding bill 13 times, securing 54 votes when 60 are required, repeating the same act while expecting a different outcome. Lawmakers debate ideology while grocery chains close, flights delay, and households sink deeper into crisis. The disconnect between consequence and conversation is staggering. Inside the Capitol, speeches about fiscal responsibility echo against empty promises. Outside, 42 million Americans face food insecurity. 100,000 workers have lost jobs, and the market has shed over $1 trillion in value since the shutdown began. Yet Congress is preparing for vacation. Their priority isn't recovery, it's optics. Each party blames the other as the country bleeds. No negotiations, no compromise, just noise. The government shutdown has become the perfect symbol of American decline. Endless debate, zero output, and millions suffering between political crossfire. This isn't dysfunction anymore. It's collapse disguised as governance. When a government can't feed its citizens, pay its workers, or release the data needed to steer its own economy, it ceases to function as a system. The shutdown has revealed that fragility was never the exception. It was the foundation. $18 billion in losses, millions unpaid, billions in vanished consumer spending. These aren't temporary figures. They're early symptoms of a failing structure. This is not a recession. It's the quiet disassembly of the American machine. A nation addicted to convenience now faces the cost of dependence. What began as a routine budget dispute has mutated into a national reckoning. The world once looked to America for stability. Now it watches the empire of abundance ration its food, delay its flights, and silence its data. The shutdown may eventually end, but the trust, the confidence, and the illusion of control are already gone.